So what we have here is perhaps the VCR to end all VCRs. This is a Panasonic unit that we acquired in 2007, and it is to date the best VCR that I've ever seen. So let's take a closer look. Upon inspection, you might notice it has a lot of labels on it, but that's only to distract you from the fact that this flips down, revealing a lot of the inner workings of the VCR. Pretty cool. So what makes this VCR so special? Well, for one thing, this is one of the first and probably the last machines to support DVD RAM. If you don't remember that standard, it was a very short-lived DVD standard, and DVD RAM allowed you to use a DVD much like you would use a flash drive. For computers, this was impractical because you were limited to the 4 gigabytes, and the read and write times were very slow. But for VCRs and DVD players that you would hook up to a TV, they were actually amazing technology that I'm disappointed they didn't catch on, because there was no need to finalize and unfinalize and do all of the hokey stuff you have to do with rewritable ordinary DVDs. It was a much more convenient format. But whatever. In addition to allowing you to play tapes or DVDs, this also has an SD card slot where you could give a slideshow. The slideshow feature only showed photos. You could not show your video clips via SD cards. That was disappointing, but that's just how it was in 2006. A lot of things weren't supported as well as they are today. That would be unthinkable today to have something like that be the case, but back then, whatever. This also has a built-in hard drive. Yes, that's right. This is essentially a DVR on steroids. And it supports HDMI. It has FireWire there. It supported optical audio out. This had like everything you could possibly dream of. Had one weird flaw though. You couldn't hook this up via the ordinary jacks in the back here. The standard input and output. Like they're there, and it was useful for a cable pass-through, but you couldn't tune to channel 3 and then use the VCR that way. You had to have it plugged in via either S-Video or HDMI or component or composite. Not that anybody was using HDMI back then, but you had to use one of the other methods to hook it up. This also allowed you to convert between all three of the storage medium, so VCR, DVD player, and the hard drive. You could dub over to any of those formats from the other format, which was pretty cool. This also had a built-in TV guide feature. In fact, here's the switcher. You can see TV guide button, and on the bottom shows the TV guide there. And it worked so well. Now, I don't think it was working just the other day. I don't know if it's going to work now, because I tried this just a minute ago and the results were not promising, but what you do is you hit the green button, and this is very finicky. Yeah, it's not having it anymore. But despite the fact that this hasn't really been in use since probably 2010, it hasn't been hooked up to cable since then, it still retained all of our channel info for the past however many years it's been. This is the first time it's failed to actually launch. But the TV guide feature was pretty much the same as on any standard cable box. If I go to Cox's, you can see it's very traditional. You have your channel info there, the names of the channels, and your preview window, and a camera that won't focus. That is annoying. But it was just like this, but it actually looked even better than this. It was really, really ahead of its time. It was much more aesthetically pleasing, if you ask me anyway. But, what do I know? I'm just the YouTuber. As far as the hard drive functionality, you can see it's on VHS now, but if I forget where the hard drive switcher is on here. That's really weird. You know, I used to have this down to muscle memory. Oh, drive select, there we go. So now we're on HDD mode. And in order to get there, you press the direct navigator button, which is very dark. Is it going to stay this time? Awesome. And yeah, these are a bunch of recorded clips, and you can move through them with the cursor. The cursor button is being very stubborn. I think the batteries in here are very low. Okay, there we go. I got it to go down to Storm Chasers. That's from the Discovery Channel. If I press play, it should eventually, in 10 years... I'm pressing it, but... And there's not going to be any audio because, yeah, by the way, this is how it's hooked up. I got one of those cables coming out of the back, and it's going into this VCR here, so... Yeah, janky setup. I'll get into why that's the case later, but as you can see, this works fine. And keep in mind, this was never hooked up to a digital TV or a flat screen TV before. This was always hooked up to our CRTs, so... One of my favorite features actually has to do with the remote control itself. So, at the time when this was made, a lot of VCRs and DVD players would come with the built-in volume control, and half the time they wouldn't work because the VCR would be a different brand. But in this case, it's Panasonic that was used with the Panasonic TV. Yep, this was the TV that it was hooked up to for most of its life. And being Panasonic, it worked just great with this. Now, let me focus. You'll see here there's a TV section, and we have everything you need. You have the power for the TV, so check it out. You can hear the high-pitched whine, of course. So you have that, and if I can focus again, you have TV video, the channel up and down, and the volume. And assuming that you have your channels programmed right, which I did, you pretty much never need to use the television remote, which is a good thing because this TV remote at the time was starting to get finicky. It's finicky now. Half the time it works, half the time it doesn't, so just being able to use this without having to go through the television remote was very handy. And if we look here, you can see I can switch, refocus, you see I can switch from, oops, wrong button. I can switch from component to video 2 back to cable, and I can also change the channels and adjust the volume. It's a little harder to see, but it is working. That in and of itself is worth getting the VCR. Okay, so there's some of the functionality of this machine, and again, it is by far the best, the coolest VCR ever. So why is it relegated to sitting on top of a speaker hooked up jankily to a much inferior unit? Well, it broke. Not completely. Everything still works except for the DVD player. One day my mother took one of the included DVD RAM discs, slipped it into the tray there, and from that day the player never worked. It tried to read that disc, and then the player just never worked again. Will not read discs. In addition to not reading discs, it does something very weird, which I will show you as I power cycle it. So if I hit the power button, so it always did this, please wait. It's computerized, so it tells you a bunch of things on the display there about what it's doing. And it shuts off. Okay, that's fine. But then you turn it on, and you hear that beeping? Never did that before. that is completely, it just started doing that the minute this acted up, the minute that DVD got put in there. Also, if you unplug this and plug it back in, it takes like 10 minutes for the thing to boot up, which it never did before either. Um, so something went horribly wrong with it, and tech support was useless as always, so it never got fixed. And because it's so uncommon, there was no place to send it to, and it's just been rotting, which is very unfortunate because it was so nice to have. I really miss this machine. You know, this is also probably one of the only VHS players made after 1998 that doesn't completely make you lose hope in humanity. The VCR functionality still works just fine. In fact, that's why it's here. This down here is Magnavox, Magnavo, whatever, combination unit as well. And this is the second one we've had. The other one was made by Panasonic, but I think Panasonic and Magnavo are the same, they're owned by the same parent company, or one owns the other, I don't know. But we had a unit just like this, and it broke in the same way. The VCR function just eats tapes. So, but it still records DVDs fine. So what I do is I hook the output from this up to the input on there, and then I record from tape to disc that way, which is very inconvenient, but whatever. It's I work with what I've got around here. But it's funny because that VCR still works fine. These, they break in like 5 seconds if you breathe on them the wrong way. You can't buy a decent VCR today. And after 1998, the quality started to really take a nosedive. But despite the fact that this was made in late 2006, hey, you know, can't complain. It has 4 heads and gives a pretty good playback. Not the best playback I've ever seen, but it's a very good playback for what it is, definitely. I figured you'd all just want to see the best VCR in existence before it inevitably meets its demise someday. It's not going to stay here forever, of course, because it looks absolutely horrible with the mouse nest of cables on top of it and all these discs, but yeah, you'll never see another one made like it. So thanks for watching, and as always, stay dantastic.